Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. The weather is grotty, windy and horrible out there, and it's pretty much been a week of grotty, horrible Tottenham Hotspur performances, but somehow we're about to talk about two performances that came with two victories, which is a bit mind-boggling when you kind of break it down, but that's where we're at. And Tottenham suddenly are in quite a prime position in both the FA Cup and the Premier League, and obviously the Champions League soon to return. Very, very strange. Got positives though. It's not all about negatives. There are positives to talk about as well. So let's start at the beginning. Obviously, after we last spoke, after the transfer window closed, Tottenham Hotspur took on Manchester City in a match where pretty much everyone expected an absolute tonking for Tottenham Hotspur, but somehow it didn't happen. In terms of possession, in terms of certainly build-up play, it kind of was a tonking, but in the only kind of way that actually matters, the scoreline, it certainly wasn't. That was partly to do with Manchester City being pretty awful in front of goal, actually. You know, if we're going to be really critical of them as well, I thought they were terrible when they got into the final third. It was also down to an excellent penalty save from Hugo Lloris, and it was down to Tottenham being incredibly clinical, and of course, the key moment in the sending off. A weird game. It kind of felt that first half, I think we all kind of went into the press room at half time, and there was just this kind of feeling of, well, we know what's coming next. But there's just something about Manchester City and Tottenham Hotspur that Pep Guardiola's men just struggle to kind of put down Tottenham. We've seen it before. We saw it in the Champions League, obviously, over both legs. We saw it earlier in the season at the Etihad as well. Even at the Etihad last season in the league, it was an incredibly tight game. I think it was just 1-0, wasn't it? Foden goal. And you know, and on this occasion, there just seems to be something about Tottenham that becomes a really clinical side in these games. I think, I'm trying to remember the stats. I think it's something like 40. I think Spurs have had 6 shots in the 2 games against Man City this season, and they've scored 4 goals. And Manchester City, I think, have had 44 shots and scored 2 goals. I think that kind of sums up exactly where these 2 games have gone wrong for City and right for Tottenham. So let's talk about, you know, there were plenty of kind of moments in this game. We had obviously the Raheem Sterling challenge on Dele Alli, which was dodgy as anything. It's one, if I'm going to try and play devil's advocate, I kind of feel looks worse when you slow it down than it probably was in slow motion. But Sterling, I think, still should have been sent off anyway because he should have got a second yellow card for the follow-up, because if they weren't going to give a penalty against Hugo Lloris, then you have to judge that as a dive. So he should have been off. Obviously, Zinchenko went off. Harry Winks was excellent. I want to big up. I want to do a positive before we get into kind of what came next. But I thought Harry Winks was really, really good against City. One of his best performances of the season, I think. Him and Lo Celso in the centre together were just superb. But Winks obviously went on that rampaging run. Zinchenko brought him down. 10 men. That's his second yellow card. And then just the game completely changed. City, of course, still had the capability to do what they've been doing sending off. But I tweeted it out and I got a little bit of flack for it, but I felt first half especially, I thought that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium was quite quiet. There were moments when, I mean, my colleagues in the press box were kind of saying to each other, we can hear everything. We can hear the players shouting. We could hear Mourinho on the touchline. It was like when the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is rocking, you can't hear a thing. The players, as they say, it's deafening. And I just felt first half especially, it just didn't have that. And it's understandable. I'm not digging anyone out at all. It's understandable because City was so on top. It was such a nervy atmosphere. And I think while the general idea is that fans are there or supporters are there to support, there's also a sense of you're also watching the game and you are dictated in your feelings and the way you are by what happens in front of you. It's not like the Spanish football, apparently, you know, there's a kind of a feeling in Spanish football the fans are there to be entertained, not to push on the team. Whereas I think in English football it's different, especially for Spurs fans. Spurs fans, you know, home and away, are normally superb in all matches. But I just felt this one, it was maybe just a sense of foreboding. You know, people thinking, oh God, it's going to be one of those kind of games. And it just got quiet. But then red card, bang, everything changed. Noisy stadium. And I think I got a lot of people coming back to my tweet about how quiet it was after then. because I think sometimes people don't understand that Twitter's about a moment and things change. But that's fine. That's fine. Everyone has the right to their reply, and of course they do. But yeah, the whole game changed. Obviously, we had the red card, and then we had a bit of debut delight, a magical moment from Steven Bergwijn. I did an absolute disservice talking about tweeting stuff out. I actually said in my tweet, Lucas Moura, great little chipped ball into the box, and Bergwijn, I said half volleyed it, chested it and half volleyed it. He didn't, obviously. Having seen the replays afterwards, he caught that ball just before it hit the floor. Absolutely brilliant goal, and you could just see what it meant to him. He admitted afterwards he was very close to crying. I think when he would have gone to sleep the night before the game on the Saturday night, there's no way, even in his dreams, he would have dreamt up a goal that perfect for his debut. It was stunning. In terms of the control, the technique, the execution was absolutely brilliant. Ederson had no chance. Absolutely rocketed into that bottom corner. And obviously, game was sealed. Tanguy Ndombele came on. I thought he did really well, actually. Absolutely stretched them. Obviously helped that Spurs had that extra man, but I felt he was just drifting past challenges. And then it was his ball into Son, who turned and clinically put the ball away. We'll come to Son later. I don't want to kind of harp on about him right now, but it was just obviously a sudden turnaround, and it was exactly what Spurs needed. A massive, massive result in terms of, I think, everyone else that weekend, barring Sheffield United, I think, had drawn. So it was probably, let's be honest, unexpected 3 points, but it's 3 points that suddenly put Spurs right up there, 4 points behind Chelsea. I want to talk a bit more about Bergwijn. I was really, really impressed by him. You could argue that he wasn't sensational in terms of what he did until the goal, but actually what he did was really impressive. I asked Mourinho about him, and he kind of, thankfully, kind of pointed out a lot of the things that I'd felt I'd seen as well, in that he defensively worked incredibly hard, covering that side in front of Tanganga. We know, he did that early challenge on Kyle Walker. I wouldn't say he's got the blistering pace I think some in the Netherlands had kind of led me to believe, but he's fast. He is fast. He's got a turn of pace. He was certainly keeping up with Walker, and that shows he's got a bit of speed about him. But I don't think he's going to be one that is going to sear past people on the pitch. But what he does have is, as well as that bit of pace, is great skill, technique. There was one bit, I was trying to remember which City defender it was, but he was turning him inside out on his side of the pitch. He worked so hard that towards the end he was cramping up, he was knackered, and to be honest, the fact that he was cup tied for the Southampton game is probably a good thing, because I think he did incredibly well, and now he can take that momentum on without maybe picking up an injury due to being, the cramp. When you come back after a cramp in the next game, sometimes you can be a little bit more at risk of a muscle injury. So he'll have had then a full 2 weeks pretty much, and well, not exactly full 2 weeks until the Villa game. He'll be able to work on stuff, get a little bit of rest as well. I thought he was superb. Mourinho's really excited about him. You can tell he's really, really excited about the player that Tottenham have got. I think this guy's going to be a regular starter. Only 22, but physically he looks ready to handle the Premier League as well. And, first game, and it's against the champions of England, and to do what he did, he's going to develop as well. He's going to only get better, which is a scary thought for opposition teams. But Lloris as well, got to give him props. I thought he did really well. Did an early, I think he knocked something onto the post in the shot with his foot. He obviously had the penalty save. He's getting a bit of a reputation for penalty saves now from a guy that didn't really save too many. I do feel that in the last 18 months or so, he seems to have just, something has clicked. Certainly against City as well. City probably can't stand getting penalties against him, if you know what I mean. I thought the defence did quite well in front of him. Obviously, some little moments, like Aurier's challenge on Sterling wasn't the greatest, but I actually felt Aurier had a good game up to that point. Tanganga is just an absolute find. He is, I say a find. He's been lurking there in the Tottenham Academy for a long time. I'm so shocked Pochettino didn't give him more of a go, because he's absolutely taken to Premier League like a duck to water. And not only that, but I'd say his probably two best performances have come against Liverpool and City, top teams, who he was, on the unnatural side for him against City. But, Mahrez kept trying to cut in, which was just playing into his hands. De Bruyne was having to come right in field to get away from him. There was one moment he came back and did a brilliant challenge, only for Lloris to clatter into him. I thought he was superb. I think he is, for me, him and Lo Celso are probably Spurs players of the season so far. And it's quite telling that I think they've only really come to prominence since the turn of the year, which probably says a lot about the first half of the season. But those two guys, honestly, absolutely superb. I thought they all did well. I thought Alderweireld had a really good game as well. Like I said, Winks and Lo Celso is just, he's so calm, he's so composed, and didn't play against Southampton. I think it was instantly noticeable. I think Spurs have now found in the post-Ericsson era a way to play, and I think it revolves very heavily around Lo Celso and what he does in the middle and his composure. And he's, I'm told he and Lamela will both be fine for Villa. Davies is going to be ready for Villa as well, so that's going to be as full a strength team as Tottenham can put out, without Sissoko and Kane. But yeah, really impressed. Bergwijn, obviously the standout of the day in terms of what he did and what a moment. And let's crack straight on with the next game that he couldn't be in, unfortunately, because of that cup tie. Southampton, FA Cup. You'd think after beating Manchester City 2-0, you're going to come in and you're going to absolutely smash it straight away against Southampton. But this is Tottenham Hotspur this season, and it's just not working out like that. Like I say, I think they did miss the two Argentines. I felt Lo Celso has just been so crucial, and Lamela as well. I think Lamela has his critics, but I think if you want someone who can create and be aggressive and help your defensive efforts, I think Eric's your man. And for him to miss another game, which will be a pain in the backside for him, and obviously there'll be some fans that will use that as a stick to beat him, but it is just a minor little kind of thing he picked up towards the end of the match against City. But Spurs they started okay. Obviously, early goal. Ryan Sessegnon played really well. I felt probably his best performance for Tottenham. Did well at left, kind of like a left wing back, left back role. Which with the Spurs fullbacks under Mourinho, it's a bit of both, isn't it? Made a really good run for the opening goal. Ball broke to Tanguy Ndombele, who actually, in the moment, didn't actually hit a great shot, but it was deflected in by Stevens for that own goal. But then Spurs just didn't build on it. It was one of those kind of sit back and not really take advantage of anything that comes next moments. Obviously, Long and Ings putting Southampton back into the lead, and it kind of felt like this was maybe going to be another year without silverware for Tottenham. And then I'd say Dele Alli was the man. Obviously, was a doubt because of the Raheem Sterling challenge in his ankle. Left him very much. Mourinho only wanted to use him for half an hour. Thankfully for Tottenham, it was a half an hour that counted. Came on, instrumental in both goals. Played a really good 1-2 with Lucas Moura, who had a good game, worked really hard. And it was a lovely shot into the bottom corner to level things up. And then it was Dele again, who set up Son, put him into the box, brought down, penalty. And Spurs somehow, in another game they really haven't played very well in, come away with a victory. And obviously now Norwich in the fifth round at home. I would say it's on paper one that Tottenham should be confident in, but Tottenham Hotspur of this season really can't be confident about anything, which is just still trying to find their rhythm, aren't they? But no, Dele Alli made a difference. He was superb when he came on. And I also felt Jedson Fernandez played really well. He's very raw. He's obviously going to have a lot of tactically to learn about the Premier League, but he's got a bit of strength about him. And I felt he took a yellow card for the team early on when he came on, which kind of showed his commitment to the actual overall game plan and the collective, as it were. And then I felt skill-wise, when Spurs really needed him to hold up the ball and waste some time, some delightful skills, some great dribbles. I think with him, it's just going to be a case of finding his best position and him being tactically set in the system. Because I do get the impression he's going to be one that wanders slightly. And Spurs have got a couple of those. I think if he can be disciplined in his role, I think he could be a really, really good young player for Tottenham. So they did really well. On Ndombele, different story for me. I felt after looking really bright against City when he came on, this was a weird Ndombele performance. This is one of those where I hate to bring it up because it clearly is just something about him, but his natural gait, the way he carries himself, is so bizarre. I watched him at times. When he's in possession, he literally could go from one end of the pitch to the other with the ball beating every single man. Problem is, he'd be so knackered halfway through, he'd probably have to stop on a park bench and have a little breather, because that's the other side. Out of possession, especially, he takes so many little moments where he has to pause and get his breath, and sometimes the game has got away and he then has to track back. Other times he'll be holding his hand on his right hip, which is worrying because it's a hip injury that he's been struggling with. I do wonder, it's total speculation, no, not based in any fact whatsoever. I just wonder whether there's some kind of hip surgery or something he might have in the summer. But obviously there's the Euros as well. Again, that's not based on anything. Only purely me watching a guy who constantly has to hold his hip. It may just be his natural position, his posture. But he wasn't quite. I know it was his first start in a while as well. I asked Mourinho after the game about him, and I said, what did you make of his performance? And he kind of launched into this kind of defence of having to take him off. He said, look, I know he was only going to be able to last an hour at the most. He said, and he came out with this line about the fans may think he played well and that I'm an idiot, but I'm not an idiot. I knew very much the plan was that he needed an hour and Dele Alli needed half an hour, and I was going to try to kind of balance that up with one and the other, or the other. And then he came out with this, you've probably seen it, little line to me about the blanket. So what he was essentially saying, he likened that scenario to the whole Tottenham experience so far, in that if you've got a blanket in bed, you can pull up the blanket around you, and then your feet are cold and exposed. So he said, so you pull your blanket back down again to cover your feet, and then your top's exposed again. He said, pretty much, I suppose, if you're going to look kind of what he's trying to say is that every time he tries to fix something at Tottenham, there's something else that is wrong as a subsequent kind of thing. And he constantly needs to tweak that, and then it changes another part of the team. And in terms of, he kind of has touched on this before, where he said, I know how to make the team more defensive, but it affects the attacking aspect, and vice versa. If you make them more attacking team, then defensive, they're going to leak goals. There's so much. It's a really good analogy. Was it technically a simile? Trying to go, because he said like. Going back to my old English classes then. But I kind of see what he means, and he's got a lot of work to do at Tottenham. We can see that. It's still such a work in progress. The football isn't great. They're creating slightly more chances than they were a couple of weeks ago, but it's a case of putting them away. Son, I said I'd talk about him. It's such a weird situation with Son. I'd say Son has been pretty poor in terms of his overall play, mainly attacking play. However, he scored 3 in 3 games. And you can't argue with that. In terms of getting the results, getting the goals, he's doing exactly what Tottenham need of him. But I'd say he doesn't look confident. He's struggling to hold the ball up. The normal moments where he breezes past people while he's dribbling with the ball, he's running into people. It felt like Lucas and he in the first half, maybe the first hour, on Wednesday night, were having a competition to see who could dribble past 2 people and run into the third man. So they both kept doing it all the time. It's just like, release the ball, release the ball. Neither of them would. It was incredibly frustrating. You could sense that among the fans as well. But they're through. They're through. It wasn't a masterclass of football. It wasn't wonderful. But the Tottenham Hotspur fans went off into the night with a second victory. And you look at it, last 6 games, despite Spurs being pretty below average, 4 wins and 2 draws out of the last 6 games, and one of those against Man City. You've got to roll with it, because that top 4 now, it's there to be had. Chelsea are absolutely doing their best to give Spurs every chance. Spurs have just got to try and take it. And we say about a run of form. They're probably not a run of form in terms of performances, but a run of results they certainly are putting together. And obviously, tough games to come, but it's in their hands. Let's talk about the break. The winter break is upon us. It's weird. I'm kind of used to the breaks having international games, and this is one that's absolutely got nothing. Mourinho told me after the game that he's extended the players' time off. The original plan was for them to be off after the Wednesday night. They were going to head off, have a little bit of holiday, and they were going to come back on Monday to Hotspur Way to do tactical sessions, to work hard on stuff. But then Mourinho said because of that turnaround and the effort they put in, he's given them another day. So they're likely to come back on Tuesday now. Anyone that follows them on social media will be able to see they've headed off around the world. People like Lucas, I think he went to Morocco, and then I think he's in Brazil. People like Gazaniga in the Maldives. Harry Kane was already in the Caribbean. Winks and Sessegnon being off in Dubai. God, I sound like a stalker, don't I? Taking advantage. They need a rest. They do, because as Mourinho has moaned about, this break comes at a strange time in that it comes before an absolutely mad period of games where 3 matches in 6 days. Villa on Sunday, away. Spurs then have an enormous Champions League last 16 tie at home against RB Leipzig on the Wednesday night, and they've barely got time to breathe and recover until Saturday lunchtime. They head to Chelsea, and we know what an enormous game that's going to be. Obviously, after the last time 2 teams met, Spurs absolutely fluffed their chances of going back into the top 4. This is going to be a big game, but it's 3 enormous games. Villa away is going to be tough as well. I know they're struggling, but they have got the weaponry to really hurt Tottenham as well. So yeah, a strange break. Ben Davies isn't going away. He's sticking around to get his fitness up, so he's ready if needed against Villa. Tanguy Ndombele has been going through a global training program, is what it's called, where they're trying to increase and improve every single aspect of him because nutrition, his diet, his fitness, everything. Because this is a player who's only really come to prominence in the last 3 years or so. Before that, he was playing lower league French football, and I think it's a case of his body is just absolutely screaming at him, "Oh my God, what are you doing to me?" Because it's, when you kind of play at a higher level for a longer period of time, your body adjusts. It knows what's coming. I think Ndombele has had a bit of a shell shock. Lyon in the French league, it's obviously it's harder football. It's a whole other level in the Premier League, especially at Tottenham coming into Pochettino pre-season, which is tough in itself, and Mourinho certainly doesn't let his players slack off either. So I presume he'll get normal days off, but I wouldn't be shocked if he's away working hard as well while doing that because, well, as we saw, he needs a lot more to his game in terms of the fitness levels. So they'll come back. Villa's going to be tough, but as I say, I was trying to think. I think other than Kane and Sissoko, I think everyone should be back. Like I say, Lo Celso, Lamela are going to be fit. I was told they were just minor injuries. Davies should be raring and ready to go. He'll have had a good, just under 2 weeks full training. If he needs him, we know Davies was the master plan. We're led to believe that Mourinho said he was the left back of choice. I'll be very interested to see whether Tanganga's slightly changed that now. Davies obviously will offer you a little bit more going forward. People might scoff at that, but the year that Danny Rose got his injury, Davies created more chances than any other defender in the Premier League. I remember putting that to him out on a tour, and I think he was a little bit surprised as well, but he did. So yeah, and I just want to make a little point on the atmosphere. This may be me reading far too much into it, but I just feel the team togetherness seems to be coming back. The camaraderie, celebrations after the goals have been absolute madness, incredible. I just wonder, and I don't want to do anyone a disservice or do them down. I don't like to slate people, but you do wonder whether having 2 players that wanted to get away from the club being allowed to get out of the club, and Christian Eriksen, Danny Rose, it just slightly changes the atmosphere. Even, I'm sure that consciously they weren't looking to bring the mood down or anything like that, but just subconsciously, when you want to leave a job, when you desperately want to leave, you're not going to be fully invested. You're not going to put your body on the line for everyone else. And I just think whether removing them from the scenario, as good of players as they both were, whether it just makes a tighter knit group. And I think that's what made Spurs so great. Certainly at the height of the Pochettino era, was this kind of close knit group, a family that he created. And I do wonder whether, especially with the new guys coming in, the young, hungry players, having got rid of some of those older players who didn't want to be there, it just changes that dressing room atmosphere. And I think we're seeing that. I really do. So even in the last 2 games, and maybe that's, despite me slating the way Spurs have played, they've showed incredible character to come back in both matches. And I think that's part of that. If you don't have that team bond, you don't have that spirit and you don't have that fight in you. And I like to think it's there. Which leads me on to one other player whose obviously future still in doubt. I just felt so sorry for him. Jan Vertonghen. He looked an absolute broken man. His performance, wasn't great against Southampton. It really wasn't. He'd come back in the team. Obviously hadn't been needed against City, but he came back in and he looked kind of how he has in quite a few games, looked a bit off the pace, looked rusty. I don't want to go as far to say his legs have gone. I've seen some people say that because I don't think he was ever a player that relied on pace anyway. I think he just seems to be out of sorts. His anticipation, positioning isn't great. And maybe there's a slight, maybe a yard of pace has gone at the moment. Whether that's something that can come back, I don't know. Whether that's something, I don't know, I think it was a serious hamstring injury, wasn't it? Was it last season? Whether that's affected him or not. Certainly Pochettino didn't use him early in the season, but it was still quite heartbreaking because this is a guy who's been one of Spurs' best players, arguably best defender probably in the entire Pochettino era. I know Alderweireld has been a great defender, but I always felt consistency-wise, I felt Vertonghen was always the best defender for me. And I think it's incredibly sad that he's now, in the last, 5 months of his contract, he can't agree terms with Spurs. He wants to stay at Spurs. It's not the same situation as Eriksen. He wants to stay. The issue is the length of the deal, the terms. He's not really agreeing to what's been offered to him because he feels he's worthy of a little bit more. And I think there'll be moments like that when he was walking off that pitch where he kind of knows it's kind of not worth it at the moment. There's a very high chance that if he continues the way he is at the end of the season, Spurs will just look at it and think, yeah, for the same money that you're probably looking for each week and that you currently earn each week, probably could get a younger player who's going to be able to do the job come in, especially with the emergence of Tanganga as well. Obviously, his future will surely be at centre-back rather than the full-back positions. I just felt it was so sad, obviously, referee making him go off behind the goal as well. So he had this really slow walk. It was like the complete flip side to Bergwijn when he went off with cramp, had this amazing lap of honour where the fans were loving it, and Son even scored during it, so he got to celebrate in that. Whereas this was the polar opposite, with Vertonghen just walking. He looked like a man that had just had the worst news in the world given to him, and he just sat on the bench, didn't even put the jacket on they're supposed to put on. Dele Alli looked across at him, and it was just one of those, you could see he was thinking, I really feel like I should be putting my arm around his shoulder, but I just feel he needs his space. Troy Parrott was sitting the other side of him looking absolutely awkward as anything, like, oh my God, what do I do in this scenario? But they just left him and slowly seemed to kind of feel a bit better. I think there was a small celebration for the Lucas goal, and then the second one, when Son scored, he threw his jacket down, he was kind of a bit more back to where he was, and then when he walked out after the game, walked out with Eric Dyer, declined any interviews politely, but he looked kind of slightly better, and I just feel psychologically that was a massive kind of blow for him. I wouldn't say it was particularly worse, a lot worse anyway than anyone else on the pitch, but if you have to sacrifice someone, you are probably going to sacrifice, as Mourinho said, he explained it afterwards, he wanted to leave on Tanganga and Alderweireld because he felt they were faster, and obviously Sanchez came on as well. It's just a shame. Like I say, it's watching a once great player just look really, really out of sorts, and unfortunately, if he doesn't sort it out, it's going to be coming towards the end of his Tottenham time. So I don't really want to leave on a sad note. So I want to also point you towards, I don't do this often, but I did an interview with a young lad, he's 30 now, called Terry Dixon this week. It's on football.london. Many of you might not know Terry Dixon because, his story is a really interesting one. If you think of what Troy Parrott is now, if you go back about 12, 14 years, that was Terry Dixon. Young player, 16. Honestly, if you think about world stars, Terry Dixon was on the verge of being one. He was in the Tottenham Academy, came through. He was training with Martin Jol's team. He was called up despite having never played a senior game or a reserve game to be in the Republic of Ireland senior squad for a friendly against, was it Chile? I think it was Chile. And he was one of the biggest talents. They used to call him the Irish Wayne Rooney. Honestly, an amazing talent. Spurs would have literally, he was a couple of years ahead of Harry Kane. Harry Kane would have struggled to actually get past him had Terry Dixon actually kind of gone all the way. But what happened was the most horrific luck with his knee. I don't want to I'd rather you kind of read the story, because what I've deliberately done with the story, I haven't got in the way as a journalist. I've let Terry tell his story. And it's a story of amazing talent, horrific luck, or bad luck, Brilliant tales of Robbie Keane, who did an incredibly generous thing for him. Ledley King, who also obviously had his knee issues. Edgar Davids training with him. Martin Joel's help. And then all the bad stuff as well, obviously, after the knee injuries, problems with alcohol, problems with depression. But he's in a good place now. He's in a really good place now. He's a father, and so he does have a happy ending. And he went back to Spurs for the first time this week since he was an 18-year-old when he got released by the club, and they've asked him to come back and hopefully talk to Troy Parrott about a kid who's in a similar situation to where Terry was, and it's hopefully a really interesting story. A lot of people have got in touch with Terry since, and if you can read it and learn a little bit more about a guy who, for me, should have been one of the biggest talents in world football, and he was Tottenham Hotspurs, but just cruel fate decided that he wasn't going to be. Have a little look. It's on football.london, and that's not me plugging my work in any way. It's just I want the story of Terry Dixon to get out there because he's a lovely guy who just essentially cruel fate crapped on him, quite frankly. He was born with the most amazing talent, the most amazing gifts of football. We are talking kind of Rooney level, or even better. But the world didn't really get to see it. So I'd love you to be able to read his story. So I'm going to leave it there. If you can go and have a look, that's great. If not, I totally understand. Not making anyone do anything. We've got a few days, obviously, now. We've got a week where Spurs are going to come back and they're going to be doing lots of tactical work. That's what Mourinho says on Tuesday when they come back. He really wants to prepare them for the games ahead, especially Villa. And I shall talk to you after the Villa game. And hopefully Tottenham will be keeping their run of form going. I shall talk to you then.